Later today, the UN General Assembly. This is where France is about to recognise a Palestinian state. The move following yesterday when the UK, Canada and Australia formally declared their recognition of Palestinian statehood in separate but coordinated statements. Portugal is also following suit, as a number of other European nations. In response, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu lashed out, saying a Palestinian state, quote, will not happen. Yet, 3/4 of UN member nations now recognise the State of Palestine. Joining me in the studio is Douglas Herbert, international affairs commentator. Doug, we've heard a lot about why France and other nations are making this move and why they're doing it now. But the big question is, what will change concretely?
Yeah, this is sort of the skeptics rolling their eyes question, right? Saying, great, we understand that there has been, these nations say, a steady sort of IV drip of growing outrage, growing horror at what they say the extent of the devastation in Gaza, the humanitarian catastrophe that's been building over the past almost 2 years now, and they acted. What difference will it make? Why do this if it's not going to concretely have an impact? Well, the argument is that why do this? Because they can't not do this. Like I said, the extent of the catastrophe as perceived by much of the international community, you said 3/4, it's at least 145 nations which have now recognized the Palestinian state. They just can't any longer sit there and do nothing. And they say that even if it seems to skeptics like a small step, like a symbolic step, that won't really concretely, tangibly change anything on the ground, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't not do it. What I mean by that is these small steps, in the eyes of those who advocate this type of move, say that they add up to bigger steps, medium-sized steps, and large steps. They say that there's absolutely nothing right now without recognition that would lend itself to all of a sudden the pieces falling into place for a pathway to a two-state solution, which used to be the flavor of the day in this region. A few decades back, we forget because it's become such a far-fetched sort of goal. But right now, those who want to do it, including France and its allies, they say that eventually this at least creates a framework for going further down the road. And I'll note that technically you'll say, well, it's not a state, right? What do they have? It's all Swiss cheese in the West Bank. Gaza's been devastated. But in reality, all the parameters are there. You do have a land, a territory as defined by international conventions. You have a people. You do have a government, albeit a weak and largely dysfunctional one, the Palestinian Authority. What's missing, perhaps, from a viable state is being able to make its own decisions in international affairs. Big steps, but that is not, in France and its allies' view, a reason not to act.
Is the US, Israel's closest and strongest ally, likely to be at all swayed by this decision?
Nothing that U.S. officials or the Trump administration has said so far, Annette, would suggest that they are at all swayed. Just to the contrary, they have been very much attached at the hip to Netanyahu's government line, which is that this is going to embolden Hamas. It's an enormous prize to terrorists such as the Hamas organization. It's not going to isolate them, as France and other countries say, and weaken Hamas because they insist Hamas could have no part in a future Palestinian state. On the contrary, they say this is playing into the hands of Hamas. It's exactly what Hamas has wanted. The United States under Trump, perhaps more than any other president or administration in recent years, have been very much on board with that message out of Israel. And the real question then to ask is, I think the number was 3/4 of the international community recognizing Palestinian statehood. There are 193 members of the UN. If 192 members of the UN would recognize Palestinian statehood, but the U.S., Israel's closest ally, doesn't, will it make a difference recognizing Palestinian statehood? And a lot of skeptics will say as long as the U.S. has Benjamin Netanyahu's back, even if not staunch 100%, as long as it's there, nothing is going to make a difference.
Now, Israel has pushed back forcefully, saying the move rewards Hamas. So what are we expected to see in terms of a response in days and weeks to come?
Well, if they carry out on some of the threats they've been making, it is going to make Netanyahu double down on his plans to annex the West Bank. Big chunks of the West Bank, which haven't officially and formally been annexed by Israel yet. This is going to strengthen, reinforce the determination of him and his right-wing coalition to go forward, to press ahead in their claims to that land. Now, remember, illegally occupied in the view of the international community, but not in the view of Benjamin Netanyahu and his cabinet. They think that all the lawyers, all the king's horses, and all the king's men, so to speak, in the international community have it wrong. They don't understand it. They don't live in the region. They don't know what's going on. So, yeah, you're going to see more aggressivity perhaps in the short and medium term, perhaps that threat of annexation. And meanwhile, in the Gaza Strip, Donald Trump's administration, by all plans, is intent on perhaps going ahead on some sort of reconstruction effort. The skeptics say an effort that will see hotels and casinos being built where right now you have a population, or once did, of over 2 million people, Palestinians, who could be relocated as a result of these plans.
Douglas Herbert, thank you.